I'm glad to introduce our guest panelists here in a talk which will be moderated by Ivan, which is a longtime friend of How to Webs. And he's been here for how many editions
This
now?
is my 6th year.
Oh, so I'm just one ahead of you. They are going to be talking about investment opportunities in media and entertainment, and that's something I'm actually looking forward to. So enjoy, and we can wait to see what we can learn today. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Andra. Hi, so I'm Ivan Breza-Brkan. I'm the founder of Netocratia. I cover startups in the Balkans, not in Romania, the rest of the Balkans. With me here today are Olaf, Dave, and Evan, who work with startups, some of them invest in startups, and we'll be talking, obviously, about investing in media and entertainment startups. We'll take questions at the end, but first of all, I'd like my panelists to introduce themselves, whichever direction you want.
Hi, I'm Evan.
The New Yorker.
I'll do a slightly longer one. I'm Dave.
What's your last name?
Yes, I'm Dave Haynes. As you can tell by the kind of shameless branding on my T-shirt, I'm from Seed Camp. We're an early stage fund investing in pre-seed and seed. We have invested in 5 Romanian companies now, so UiPath, Traderion, Brainient and Ubervu, both of who had an exit, and then one which I'm forgetting, which maybe I'll remember by the end of the panel.
Okay, my name is Olaf. I don't sound like, but I'm from Romania. Since 8 years I'm here. I worked for Telecom Romania before. Now I changed sides and I'm looking on the side of the startups, working for Matchmaker Ventures, which actually tries to help startups to accelerate their sales, as we call it. Meaning we bring them together with the big corporations because we know, unfortunately, these guys are not speaking the same language as startups. And there's obviously help needed. And that's what we do.
So just to add, I was an entrepreneur for 18 years, and now I have a small venture fund called LDV Capital, investing in great entrepreneurs that are working in visual technologies. And we can talk more about that, what that is later.
Since you add, let's continue with you. So my first question is actually a bit broad. So when talking about investing in entertainment and in media, there's a lot of trends. So if we just Google investing in these areas, there's going to be a lot of industries, a lot of specifics. What I'm interested in is when we're talking about these 2 specific industries, what's the trend that you're most interested in, most likely to maybe invest in, or just find that there is a future in it? Evan, with you, I guess it's visual technology, right?
Yeah. So the definition of visual technology is any technology that captures, analyzes, filters, monetizes, or displays visual data. So obviously images or video or just sensors. So talking about media and entertainment, what excites me the most these days is we are overwhelmed with videos and images online and creating them exponentially every single day. So what excites me is the potential to filter the 1% of this content that I'd be interested in. And most likely with computer vision and artificial intelligence, hopefully more interesting companies will come about that this delivers that video to me, or the 3 videos to me on a daily basis that I would be interested in. Or another sector I like a lot, which has been talked about for years, is interactive video. And I don't mean you touch it, click to a link. I mean, what if we could change the storyline of movies in real time, almost like a scavenger hunt? And what if we can explore and be part of the end result of a movie rather than just watching it from beginning to end? And I think those are 2 sectors in media and entertainment that I look for opportunities in.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of sectors that excite me. I mean, I think specifically within media and entertainment, I mean, you couldn't have a panel like this and not mention VR and AR, although, you know, we'll see how the hype lives up to the reality. But I think what's exciting there is it's a completely new platform for, you know, different types of storytelling, or, you know, it's a whole new media platform to build an audience, to tell a story, to interact with others. So very excited about that. As an investor, it's kind of tricky because we're kind of in the sort of installment phase of VR AR. Like, we're not kind of in the deployment phase yet. So there are going to be some very big companies built in the next, or start in the next year. and as an investor, you kind of don't want to miss those ones. But also, kind of, being wrong can be being early can be as good as being wrong in investment. So it's a tricky one, but it's something that Seacamp has done 2 investments now in the space, and we're definitely actively looking for more. So if anyone knows anyone in that space, let me know. And then you mentioned artificial intelligence. I think there's some really interesting stuff happening around the kind of, there's a sort of a tag of like creative AI, which is quite broad, but as artificial intelligence helps us to be more creative, or is starting to replace the, some of the ways that humans can be creative within entertainment and music and content. So, think of both, and it could be assisting humans to do this, or it could be generative, but, writing stories, painting, writing music. We nearly invested in a London-based company called Juke Deck, which is you basically tell the computer that I want a song like this in this style in this many seconds, and it delivers it to you in about 10 seconds to your desktop. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in that space as well.
Olaf?
Okay, I would not necessarily have to add anything here because the guys already mentioned. So maybe just we have, as matchmakers, a slightly different angle because we are helping actually startups which are there today to sell their products. So while these are rather future-driven thoughts which you had, so we are now thinking on, or we have startups actually already contracted on things like using mobile network operator data to make better targeted advertisement, which sounds totally boring maybe for you because you thought about this some years ago, but it's still not really solved, right? So it's at least not fully solved, and there's still huge potential. I mean, so we are more on these kind of things in the moment, not looking so much forward, but I would of course agree that virtual reality is, augmented reality is of course changing fully our life. Yeah. Just seen a nice movie from a restaurant, Le Petit Chef or something like this. Amazing.
It's an interesting point, just like thinking about, you obviously partner startups with larger organizations. Now I'm interested in how many of you have startups that are in the media or entertainment sector, or would classify. Okay, so I won't ask into detail, but what we've seen with startups, especially from Eastern Europe, especially from Romania, Croatia, Serbia, and so on, is that those that do well are mostly B2B. There are not as many B2C startups in general industries that truly succeed. Do you think that that's something that'll ring true with these industries as well? Should these founders focus on building products that will be, for example, platforms like the music one that Dave mentioned and so on? Or is there a place for B2C startups in media entertainment that can succeed on a global level?
Yeah, I mean, I think on that, I think if you're coming from this specific region, I mean, maybe with B2B, it's just the fact that, you don't have large consumer audiences here, so it's, I guess maybe arguably more difficult to tap into B2C. I think if you are thinking of B2C, you need to think global from day one, and that probably means kind of, maybe not having your whole team here in the region forever. So I think that may be one reason, and then B2B. I think B2B, there's a lot more room for the kind of like the technical products, the kind of the picks and shovels of the entertainment and content industry, where frankly you could be building them from anywhere in the world. So yeah, I can see why B2B would continue to be a trend, but I mean, anyone can build anything. So I wouldn't base what you were working on, given the fact that B2B is more prevalent in the past. It doesn't necessarily need to be.
But I also think that, so there's nothing wrong with B2B or versus B2C. Obviously, there are different types of business, different scale. I love investing in teams that are building B2B businesses that have a clear ROI that business is willing to pay for. And actually, there's a couple of examples of it. For example, there's one company that we invested in Sweden called Mapillary. It's a crowdsourced street view platform trying to build a more real-time street view with images from people's cameras in cars and on bikes. The global vision is let's visualize our world. And the big picture is that. The focus of the business, though, is a B2B market that's selling that data. But they're really going after both eventually. And the good news is that the B2B focus, there is a clear ROI that you can solve and start making money sooner rather than investing a ton of money into a consumer app that's higher risk and more difficult to do.
Do you think that in those cases, businesses should think about like an angle in either B2B or B2C if they're the opposite. So if this is a business that's focusing on B2B, should they already in their early stage be thinking, wait, how can we do this potentially as B2C or?
I think the key is focusing on where the clear ROI is. I don't think you should try to do both. It's very hard as an early company to focus on two sectors. It's almost impossible. Focus on one, succeed there, and build a $25, $50 million revenue company. And then when you have the luxury of being there, you figure out what's next after that. Doing both in the beginning is a death choice, I think.
Yeah, also I think if you think about the funding environment here, if you're doing B2C in entertainment and media, you might not necessarily find the investors who are willing to take the risk on, hey, we're going to build a huge audience and then monetize it later. You're much more likely to find investors willing to kind of, invest into that story in the US. So versus if you're doing B2B, where you can say, hey, we have one client, they're paying, 40,000 euros. Now I'm going to go and get another 10 with your money. I think that's an easier story for some of the kind of, I wouldn't say conservative, but some of the investors here are used to those types of businesses.
Yeah, well, I would obviously fully agree that I see also the B2B is a bit more natural somehow. Also, first of all, due to market sizes already mentioned. We anyhow focus more on B2B in our model, but nevertheless, I think it's of course also possible to succeed with a B2C model from here. Why not? It is just a bit harder than perhaps if you would start in the US. I mean, maybe there you have 100 similar ideas in the moment and you have to compete with them. Here you have to find the money, you have to find the customers. That's maybe a bit more difficult. I don't know. I would say.
Dave mentioned like using local resources. It can be investors and so on. Ola, from your experience, if we're looking at the entertainment and media space, and again, logical partners here would be, for example, telecoms or media companies and so on. Does it make sense for these startups to partner up locally in order to grow globally? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? Because I've heard from startups that have had great partnerships and unfortunately a lot more that are like, yeah, we tried working with a large company, didn't really work out. We should have just like skipped them and try to go local to the Valley or whatever.
Yeah, well, I think there's not the right or wrong answer on that, right? It depends a bit on the situation. Knowing both sides, I would say if you have a good access to a local big partner, telecom or whatever, bank, I don't know, whatever it could be, why not? Why not to use it? Yeah, of course you should use it. However, these guys are usually talking a slightly different language than a startup. And it may also distract you and defocus from what you're doing as a startup. You should develop your product. You should not bother with 30 lawyers sitting on the other side of the table, right? Because you anyhow don't have anything to balance that. So that's a bit the difficulty. So coming now from a rather matchmaker point of view, I would say maybe it's better to develop your things first, to have a real product, to have a real business model, and then you ask some guys, ask others, whatever, to help you to get the right context to the big ones, and then you accelerate very fast. Yeah, it might be better. But of course, if you have an opportunity, okay, stay opportunistic, do it. I mean, nothing should prevent you from doing it, right?
I mean, I think the piece, sorry, Dave, one second. One of the things when people say, hey, it didn't work, or hey, I couldn't do this, it's an execution issue. And it's whether or not are you selling something that's a morphine, meaning your customer needs it and gets addicted to it to survive. If you're selling a morphine and they can't live without it, you're going to have a great relationship because they're going to pay you a lot of money. If you're selling an aspirin, which is kind of maybe will work, or maybe it's going to help your customer, they don't know if it's fixing their headache or their problem, the relationship's probably not going to succeed and you're not going to make money. So I actually put the responsibility, instead of the big company that couldn't work with us, the responsibility is on the entrepreneur. Absolutely. And the execution of that product and who you're collaborating with. And I have failed several times and succeeded as an entrepreneur, and it's my fault when we failed. It's nobody else's fault.
Absolutely. Sorry, 1 second only to this. I think it's absolutely true. I mean, first of all, the startup has to adapt. You cannot expect from the big animal to move, right? That's clear. Nevertheless, it's really the question, I mean, you need to. It's a lot what you have to adapt. You have to make a big change of perspective. What these guys are into, how is their decision-making process working? It's not just you find one guy who says it's cool. Even if it's the CEO, it may not work to anything, right? Because there are 10,000 processes to follow, committees of investment or marketing planning or whatever. So it's.
But you would agree that when you're selling a morphine, when you're really selling a problem, that shit disappears. There's much less process and it happens much faster. So it comes back to what you're selling. If you're trying to move an iceberg up a mountain, it's not going to work. But if you find another solution and you move the iceberg down the mountain because it's so valuable, it's going to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would maybe kind of caution, just to take a different view, I'd caution working with some of the bigger companies, especially locally. I mean, number one, it's going to take up a lot of your time. They're going to be very demanding on features at an early stage. So if you can avoid it, or obviously if it's an obvious fit and you can tick that one off and get some money, that's good. But invariably, I've seen companies where it's actually been way more of a distraction. We worked with there was a Romanian ad tech company that we were looking at, and they'd really perfected their tech for players in this region, but they had absolutely no visibility on the world outside. They didn't understand some of the challenges, and when we dug in a little bit, that's what we saw, and we didn't go ahead with the investment. So I would definitely caution that. On paper, it looks great to have this big company. You can put the logo on your pitch deck, but just think about it. The other thing, and this is something I experienced in a startup that I was in, was think about those companies in this region. They may well be subsidiaries of much larger organizations who are based elsewhere, and so don't assume that if you manage to sell it into the local big company that the parent company is going to buy it in. I was going into these big record labels and realizing that actually the guy in Sony Greece had no idea who the guy in Sony US was. It's just a big company, and they don't talk to each other necessarily. And the other thing is you need to realize that they might share. So to use a Sony example, where you look at Sony UK, a lot of that is just, hey, they have product from the US and there's a team that's, their job is to sell it to a local market. So, your product that you might think might be really great for Sony might not be great for, Sony here or Sony there. So I would definitely kind of caution really think about it when you go after the big company, because you can waste a lot of time.
You mentioned the connection between, in this case, Sony in Greece and in the US and UK. Most of us were here for the talk of Vitaly Golom in the morning, where he mentioned that there are obviously clusters of technology clusters. So, for example, in Silicon Valley, you obviously have the top technology cluster with most of the software companies and so on. For media, you should be in New York and so on and so forth. To succeed in the entertainment or media industry on a global level, it will obviously take new connections, right? And the media and entertainment industry are not in Silicon Valley. They're in LA, in New York. And while the tech sector may be open to, we need all these Eastern Europeans that are really good developers, we need those companies, we want to invest in those companies, do you think that there's, and I'm asking the New Yorker here especially, do you think that there is a possibility of, to a certain point, prejudice or just like not openness to working with Eastern European companies when it comes to deals? Just because, right, aren't you the ones that are powering our shit? Should these companies, these founders, think of, how should they think of when trying to do partnerships with the companies in their industries, which are, again, LA, New York, etc.?
I think there's two pieces of that. I mean, once again, back to if you build software that solves a real problem for, let's say, entertainment or comedians or musicians, you really do solve that nobody else has done. They're going to work with you. What's going to help you is, what I love is investing in European companies that are very technically focused, and they have one or two business and or co-founder that spends time in New York or in LA, and they're the ones that are building up the relationships. Because anyway, any business relationship is about trust, and it's not going to happen the first time you meet them. So that person has to be frequently in New York or wherever your customers are, and building that relationship. And then the relationship is with that person who is part of a brilliant tech team here in Romania or anywhere in Europe. And the fact that there might be more they're brilliant and affordable developers here, the operational costs could be less and more efficient for that customer. So I think that's the best way to find the customers. If you're not regular in the US or wherever your customers are, whether or not they're London, New York, or LA, it's going to be much harder unless it's a pure web-based tool that has a community that is visibly trusting you.
Yeah, so just to speak from experience on that point, so I was a part of the founding team at a company called SoundCloud. So we were heavily on the tech side of the fence when it came to the music industry, but we realized that even though we didn't have to rush off and go and do all these music licenses like Spotify did, we still needed to be very close to the music industry. So from day one, even before launch, whilst the product team were in Berlin, actually you'd think Berlin was a big hub, it has a great music scene, but the music industry guys just aren't there. So it made a lot of sense for me to be in London. We actually set up a completely separate office there, and I would just do the commute, as you said. So I would be frequently on a plane. I would go and do a week in New York, go and see all the people, build those relationships, way ahead of actually needing to do any business as well. Get on a plane, then next month go to LA and back and forth. And I think if you're a purely technical team, or you're a team where you want to do something in the industry, I would definitely advise finding someone who kind of understands the industry. Maybe don't get the kind of really expensive guy or girl who's been entrenched in the industry and is a bit too set in their ways. But if you can find someone to do the kind of the translation between the two, I think that's going to help you massively in the long term.
So basically, it's a matter of hustling. It doesn't really there shouldn't be problems if you. Well, there will be challenges, but there's no set point in, oh, you're from Eastern Europe, fuck you.
I don't think that's happening anymore. And I think it comes back to what you're selling. And to Dave's point, it's interesting if you're selling to maybe a type of companies, let's say next generation video producers. They're not the old school. They might only need one face-to-face, and then the rest can be via email or Skype. If you're trying to sell to the CEO of a music division who has been in the industry for 30 years, most likely that's somebody you have to take out to drinks once a month for the next 12 months before they even think of doing a deal with you. It's all about that relationship. So that target and almost matchmaking, like Olaf is saying, it always depends on your target customer and who they are and what they want. It changes every single time in every single industry.
Yeah, well, I would just say it's what you said is not only specifically for media, but in principle, it's actually the essence of why we think we have to be here as matchmaker, because that's the point. We know an industry, we know companies, we know decision makers there, and we don't go once a year. No, the idea is we go more often with many, many different startups, right? So that's when it makes sense.
Okay, we have a few minutes left. Any questions?
I can't see any.
So let me say something on this topic. Okay, there's a question right there. So you guys all want to be known. You want to say, everybody, you want the speakers and other people to know that you're brilliant. If you don't ask a question, we have no idea if you're brilliant. If you ask brilliant questions and you race to get a question up there and you intrigue us and other people, we're going to race to talk to you. So let's try that again. How many people have questions?
Just one.
2. We got 3. Okay, go.
Cool. I said that before you.
You did. You're
so
definitely
no pressure, right, on me. Okay. So okay, I have a feeling from your speech is that in Eastern Europe there are not so many media and entertainment successful startups. Can you? Maybe I'm wrong, but can you name one that is successful? How did they succeed? Because I have this feeling that you're always talking only about US. And it's only about, those other guys there. But are there successful media and entertainment startups here in Eastern Europe, and how did they do it?
Sure, any pirate site.
Tell your story.
No.
Tell your story.
Okay. That's not global though.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I will use my story then. So specifically, I run something that was a blog a few years ago. Now it's a business that runs in 3 countries. It's basically a tech magazine that covers what's going on in the web and tech business across ex-Yugoslavia. We're bootstrapped. We haven't taken money yet. We're growing, and we're the leader in native advertising.
And how do your numbers compare on traffic to the big companies?
We're still smaller than them, but we're basically as far as traffic, we're almost there. As far as revenue, we're still lagging a bit, but we're growing unlike them. They're stalling.
Yeah, I feel like I can't name too many successes. A couple of companies that come to mind. There was one. So again, back to my SoundCloud days. There was a company in Bulgaria, very technical team, great team of engineers. They actually had a consumer proposition, tried to take it to market, didn't quite work. It was like a sort of an Eastern European version of Shazam, I guess. But we ended up acquiring the company just because of the technical expertise and the technology that they'd developed. Now, I'm not saying that's the perfect outcome. I think every entrepreneur wants to build a standalone company, but I think that's a good example of some team that was really applying themselves to their area of expertise and building a very, very valuable product. There's another team. I think it was in Croatia.
Which one?
Which I don't know whether that counts as this region or not, but there's a company called ClipDis, which is actually building a very kind of social mobile product that allowed you to message each other using clips that they'd taken off YouTube, which I found kind of compelling and used a lot myself. They ended up getting some investment in London. Again, I don't think that they're now looking for more money and to build stuff out, but that shows that a team of talented guys can build a great consumer product that lived up to it was as good as any other product that we'd seen coming out of the US in the same space. So I think it can be done. There isn't as many. I think if you move to Sweden, Germany, London, I think we could list off successes for quite a while, but maybe not as many from here.
You also got success is many different levels, right? So you've got Uberview, who was a social analytics platform for media. They wouldn't exist without visual data and what's happening out there. And so we're not just talking about entertainment and media. There's a ton of services underlying this that helps the media and technology companies. And they sold, and they raised very little money, and that's a great exit. And so
raised from Seedcamp?
It was a Seedcamp company, and I was a mentor with them early at Seedcamp, so I'm not biased at all. And so that's a great example. Okay, and all you need is a couple of those and keep going. I think reiterate, raising capital is not the goal. It's a means to an end. And you can raise as much as you want depending on your vision for your business. So having 10 exits like Uberview in this region would be extremely valuable for the individuals and the companies and the ecosystem.
But actually, we forgot there are examples, very obvious examples. It's gaming, right? In Romania or Croatia or Serbia. So, for example, in Slovenia, how many of you have been to Slovenia? So, yeah, not a lot of people. Slovenia is a small country, right? Even compared to Croatia, which is far smaller than Romania. And they have Outfit 7, which does the Talking Tom games, right? It's billions of downloads. So in Serbia, you have Nordius, the biggest football manager. In Croatia, you have Nanobit, which actually opened an office in Romania. So as far as entertainment goes, we should have had someone from the gaming industry on the panel as well. I think that when we're talking about maybe mentors and advisors and people that can help, maybe we should focus on the gaming industry. Maybe they're the ones that can help you guys, if you're focusing on video or whatever, scale up, because they've managed, in most cases, to my knowledge, do it bootstrapped and do it on their own. And gaming is obviously a big part of the entertainment industry now. Right? Last question?
I think it's the third or fourth time this day that I hear that a lot of tech companies in Eastern Europe are led by tech founders. And I think this is mainly the truth. This is a pattern here. What do you think it's the cause, and how do we change this?
Why is it a problem?
I think that at some point there is a limit.
Bill Gates of Microsoft was a technical founder. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook was a technical founder. Don't forget about the regions for now. Okay. I can't wait to invest in technical founders. I'd rather invest in technical founders. Just as me as an example. That's not everybody. but I don't think it's a negative. Some others might. The question is whether or not that technical founder can bring together the right DNA or expertise that technical founder is not an expert in.
So you agree that to grow a company, let's say beyond 100 people, you need a mix, and only a technical founder is not enough.
But I don't think a technical founder is a problem. For example, in Croatia, you have a company called Five. Its technical founder, the good thing he did was he found business development people that knew. So I think that the bigger issue is not technical founders. The bigger issue is not enough biz dev people with experience.
Or the technical founder cannot inspire the biz dev, marketing, and other people. That's the issue. It's not that there's a technical founder, it's who has that technical founder brought around her or him to build a business.
Or thinks marketing is bullshit, which is an experience I've had with a lot of founders.
I mean, I would say in London, I almost have the opposite problem where we see a lot of very talented non-technical founders and we say, sorry, we can't invest until you have a technical founder. So it's it works both ways. And I think on the point with technical founders, I mean, I know a lot of them. I know a lot of teams, founding teams that are purely technical folk, but they also have the softer skills. You know, one of them might be better than the other at storytelling, for example. But I know a lot of the companies that are led purely by, you know, the people at the top are kind of technical first and then other things second.
I mean, I would also not make it as black and white, of course, right? But I somehow see your point, and I saw this also in several mentoring sessions, that there are very technical guys, they have something which I, from my business perspective, immediately translated into something to make some money out, where those guys have never thought of, and they thought of something which I would say that never works. Yeah. So perhaps it comes to, there are some brilliant minds who can do both, and the rest should just assume, the same as I assume I have no clue of technical stuff, they should assume they have no clue of marketing or storytelling or fundraising or whatever. And they should get the right guys, as you said. And if you speak about 100 people, obviously anyhow, then it's a bigger team already. So I hope they have not 100 tech guys, because then they have definitely a problem. Yeah, so perhaps
okay, I think we're out of time. If you have any questions, ask these guys. They'll be here. Andra, I think we're out of time, right? Or?
Yes, indeed. But thank you so much. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, everyone.